My God!
Here we go, an optic that fails on every level so hard that I've taken a year to fully evaluate it. Or more likely, I've lacked the motivation. The Vector Frenzy Plus. Not that one, or that one, this one. That for some reason all have the same name. But this Frenzy Plus is like the SIG Romeo 8T if it decided to collect chromosomes like my Discord troglodytes. Full disclosure, I used to get free product and have my own discount code with Vector Optics until I decided to cancel all of those.
I can't see. Why isn't it reloading?
I was offered this optic for free, but I paid for it with my own money. On paper, it has all of the features one might want for a very attractive price tag: big window, protective shroud, night vision lockout, a multi-reticle system, and 2 inline AAA batteries. Nobody asked for that one. But even if they did, it wouldn't matter because quite literally every feature is implemented incorrectly or just doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Starting up top, we have an aluminum shroud that is bolted to the body in no less than 8 places. EOTechs were probably the first to implement this style of system. Essentially, the idea is to keep the impact shock away from the fragile glass and electronics and put it into the mount. That sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. The best implementation of this style is probably the titanium shroud on the Romeo 8T, but that is part of the reason that the 8T requires a signature written in blood to acquire. Oddly enough, an exchange of bodily fluids is also how SIG won so many government contracts. But back to the Vector foreplay, we do have a big 31 by 26mm window, and I think people will like that. The glass is relatively good, flat image, a minor blue notch filter, and looks pretty clear under night vision. Unfortunately, that last point is somewhat moot. But moving on down, we have 2 AAA batteries supplying power to the unit. Why that choice specifically? No idea. Maybe in another country where real batteries are harder to come by, that might make sense, but since I currently reside in a real country, Portland aside, I would rather have a Transverse CR123A or 2032 or similar. With that simple change, you could shorten up the body and cut out a few ounces. Speaking of ounces, it's around 12 ounces depending on your battery selection. Now let's talk about controls. On the left side of the body, we have our brightness adjustments and our night vision button. Let's start with the night vision. You have 9 daylight settings and 2 nighttime settings. Unfortunately, both of those night vision settings are daylight visible, meaning that they are completely worthless for actually dark environments, as the reticle is just a bright blur. Again, having a dedicated button to access the night vision modes is a really nice feature to have, it just doesn't work. And while it has 9 daylight settings, on maximum brightness, it's maybe not quite as bright as I would appreciate. Now, getting into the reticle switching, by holding down the up arrow, the reticle will start flashing and you can cycle through the 4 different modes. When you get to the mode you want, just hold the button again to set it. Now, instead of having holds for different distances, you just have all of the EOTech features a la carte. The basic option is a 3 MOA center dot, which is pretty clean. You can then have the dot plus the 65 MOA segmented outer circle with no hash marks. You can get the center dot plus the 4 hash marks, and finally you can have all of it together or just the standard donut of death. What's funny is that they all do the same thing. With the segmented circle, you can use the negative space as a holdover up close and ranging at distance. With the hash marks, you can use the mark for ranging and holdovers up close, and of course the same for all of them together. So you kind of have 4 options, but really only 2. Elevation and windage on the opposite side of the body are adjustable via a flathead screwdriver or anything you can fit in them. Clicks are audible if mushy. Talking about the mount, it's actually a separate piece entirely that is secured and placed by 4 screws. Well, at least it was, as one of those screws is now gone. At some point during the evaluation process and several thousand rounds later, all 4 of the screws worked themselves loose and one disappeared entirely into the ether, resigned to its dark fate, rusting, forgotten for all of eternity, as it deserves. So yes, at one point I noticed that the body was wobbling and I thought it was the QD lever coming loose, but no, the entire body had come loose. This is one of those instances where if you did want to buy one of these for some reason, I would recommend taking it apart and Loctiting those screws. Now, the QD lever locks in place and a little release tab needs to be pressed to get it to unlock. The cross bolt itself is squared off to act as a recoil lug, which is a fine compromise if you can't just machine a recoil lug into the bottom of your optic. On the left-hand side, you have your tensioner, which is adjustable by hand. It has a very nice tactile click when adjusting the tension. The QD system never lost tension, but the mount and body did try to separate, much like your favorite YouTube couple in 2025, or like your favorite gun tuber has a few screws loose. I'm sure there's a few other jokes in there. Now back to issues, the glass has a very nasty glare. With any significant backlighting, you get this strange square pattern around your reticle, which is just a little annoying. Now when you have a strong forward light source, the entire emitter housing reflects around your reticle and presents this ugly red haze for your viewing displeasure. Also, just a minor annoyance, but what isn't at this point, the emitter has a noticeable flicker. Did E3 OEM this? Last failure to note is the FP has auto on and off technology, but it doesn't really work. Approximately 50% of the time it will turn right on when you pick it up, and the other times you have to either hit the optic or start messing with your buttons to turn the reticle on. So it is there on a technicality, but it doesn't really work. Now, talking about actually using the thing, I've been using it for almost a year, several thousand rounds later, 5.56, 300 blackout, 9mm, 6.5 Creedmoor. Honestly, I'm not really sure why I tested it this long. The only issue that developed during testing was the body coming loose. Other than that, since day one, I knew about the rest of the issues. So in an exercise of most dollars spent to least info gleaned, I spent thousands of dollars to tell you that this thing sucks. This is one of those times where a company designs everything you want on paper without understanding why you want those things or how to properly implement them. Night vision button with good glass and light transmission, but the night vision settings are too bright and don't work. It has a big window, but the entire emitter reflects into the glass and the glare negates the big window. You have multiple reticles, but you're really only going to use one of them, and none of the other three options really provide any additional capability, and the reticle flickers randomly at times. It has a shroud to protect the optic, but then the body and mount almost fell apart. For some reason, you have two AAA batteries that might work well in other markets, but not this one. It has an auto on and off feature, but that only works part of the time. So should you buy it? No. Chinese companies are notorious for this, copying good ideas with poor implementation. Most of these companies could do so much better if they just hired a team of American testers who know what the American market wants and needs. Now, I am not applying for this job, nor recommending it to anyone else. The problem is the cross-section of people willing to shill Chinese products aren't going to push back on the people payrolling them. They would rather accept a check ostensibly from the CCP and simply push more products. That makes their life much simpler. Vector does actually make some good stuff. Their 1, 3, and 4X prisms are quite good, especially for the money, and the Continental line of LPVOs has a few decent models that are also good for the money. But with all that out of the way, guys, let me know what you think of the Vector Frenzy Plus 31 by 26mm optic, and with all that out of the way, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. God bless.